Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're going to give people an extra minute here to join, so bear with us. We're going to get started at 12:01 Central Time. Thanks. Hey everyone, welcome to the Right-Click Tools and Advanced Scenarios webinar. My name is Chris Muster. I'm the CTO here at Recast Software, and today I'm joined by Marty Miller. Marty is our Customer Success Manager at Recast, and he helps our customers with any technical questions they might have while setting up the product. Marty's going to be keeping an eye out for any questions today. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A button inside of Zoom, and he'll try to get those answered as we're going through stuff. If you're watching this on the YouTube live stream, you can use YouTube chat to ask your questions, and we'll try to get those answered as well. So, brief overview of right-click tools. When we usually talk about when we usually talk to customers about the right-click tools, they're often most familiar with us in terms of our productivity tools, right? Our client actions, client tools, console tools. And oftentimes when people stand up enterprise standalone, they'll kind of utilize these features to start while evaluating the product. And what we're going to be focusing on today is covering a little bit more of some of these other features, and in particular things in this enterprise ready tier. So we're going to be talking through mostly our routing model. So we're going to be talking through Cloud Management Gateway, fast channel support, those types of things, how to extend Recast Management Server to support your workgroup devices and untrusted domains, maybe with a little bit of a coverage of our permissions model as well. And by the way, while we're going through this, we do have a poll up to ask how are you, or what components of this might be interesting to you. We're just curious from a content standpoint. Are you using untrusted domains, workgroup devices, devices that aren't connected to your corporate network, or are you interested in limiting firewall access, limited admin rights, that kind of thing? So please vote in the poll. We're definitely interested in hearing about that. The other components that we're probably not going to talk about today, but we did do a webinar last month on, are things like our actionable dashboards. These are areas inside the ConfigMan console where we take the development team's experience as sysadmins and try to dashboardize the specific problem areas that we've experienced in our past as sysadmins. So we try to expose those areas and give you the right-click actions right on the dashboards to be able to fix them. We have Builder and Runner in our automation platform that lets you quickly solve organization-specific problems in your environment by creating an easy button for your service desk to use from within the ConfigMan console. And we also have a kiosk management platform that lets you take that last 10% of devices that take most of the configuration effort and try to lower the bar to some of that configuration effort. Like I said, we're not going to talk too much about most of the pie chart. We're going to be focused pretty much exclusively on this enterprise ready component. And in particular, we're going to be focused on areas that have this controlled routing component. So on the right, we have pieces of the right-click tools puzzle that are beyond just the right-click tools install that you install inside of your ConfigMan console. So the top one, we have Recast Management Server, which is really required for all of the enterprise-ready components. It's kind of the heart of all of the customizability that we have inside of the right-click tools with regards to routing. It makes all of the decisions about where actions are going to be run based on the routing rules that you've set up in your environment. And we're gonna dive into routes a little bit and talk more about how to configure those and that kind of thing in the demo. We have Recast Proxy, which is your way of running right-click tools as a service account. And the cool thing about Proxy and that service account is it doesn't require any trust relationship back to that Recast management server as far as a domain trust is concerned. We do have, kind of a certificate-based trust mechanism in place, but it's completely outside of that domain trust, which lets us extend the right-click tools into untrusted domains. So you can interact with users, devices, or other Active Directory objects in those untrusted domains. And it really goes beyond the untrusted domains too, right? If you have a specific subset of actions that require a different user account, you can route those actions to that user account. For example, if you limit the scope of which users can look up MBAM keys, for example, you can utilize Recast Proxy to try to lock that down a little bit further. And then we have our Recast Agent component. And Recast Agent is how we run actions as a local system account. This lets you get around some of the local admin permission requirements. It lets you get around some of the firewall rules that we require in a default installation of right-click tools to allow some of those actions to interact with your remote devices. And we give you some flexibility in that Recast Agent because you can set it up to use a direct communication layer to the Recast management server where we maintain an outbound connection from the Recast agent to that management server on the port you specify, or we let you use the Config Manager client's native fast channel communication layer where the client itself is already maintaining an outbound connection to your management point, so we can just send the actions over that communication channel that already exists. So kind of up to you. And we'll talk through both of those scenarios as well. Some of the bits from this tier that we're probably not going to talk as much about today. We're not going to cover web-based reporting. We're not going to cover task scheduling. The audit logs we'll probably view a little bit, but not really dive into. We might talk a little bit about customer permissions depending on time too. So in order to kind of understand the right-click tools and how Recast Management Server and how some of these enterprise-ready features make them better, it's important to understand how the right-click tools behave in a default install, right? How do they behave without Recast Management Server? And so this is kind of our view of the world in right-click tools community or right-click tools enterprise standalone without that Recast Management Server, where we have an admin console, we have the right-click tools installed on it, and the user is running actions against devices, users, et cetera, from that admin console. And the right-click tools reach out to those endpoints via remote WMI, remote registry, remote file system. And everything runs under the context of the user that's running that config man console. So that means that user needs permission to interact with all of the remote endpoints or Active Directory areas in order to run the actions. So the user needs to be an admin on that remote device in a default Windows installation. And the user, or you also need to open up ports to those endpoints because in a default Windows installation, we don't have the ability to reach out and connect via WMI remote registry or admin shares. So there is some configuration required. But we find a lot of our community users are okay with that configuration in a default install. When you layer on Recast Management Server, the default Recast Management Server install will behave in much the same way, where with some added back and forth. So the right-click tools installed on your admin console will reach out to the Recast Management Server. They'll run the action that you've requested, and the server itself will go through its set of rules to determine, are you allowed to run it? Where is it supposed to be run? And it'll also log the action in its audit log. If it determines that you have permission to run the action, on a default installation, it'll send the action back to the right-click tools to go ahead and reach out to the endpoints. So you're still going to need that same set of permissions and firewall rules that you needed in the community standalone, community and enterprise standalone installations, right? Because everything's running under your config man console user admin context. So you need remote admin rights on the box. You need remote WMI, remote registry, remote file system access to those boxes. And like I said, this is how it behaves when you just install Recast Management Server and point your right-click tools to it and don't configure routes. We tried to make it so that it behaved in exactly the same way that people that were coming from the community version were used to kind of seeing. Where things get a little bit more interesting is when you start adding some of these optional components. And probably the easiest way to start is with our Recast agent component, because in a default Recast management server installation, we already have it configured to interact with Recast agents. All you have to do is install a Recast agent on the box, and the server will automatically utilize that communication layer without you having to change anything. So, in this scenario, when the server chooses the Recast agent route, the right-click tools send their action up to the server. It does its normal permissions checks, its audit logging, and it determines that you're running a device-targeted action against a device that has a Recast agent that's currently connected to the Recast management server. In that scenario, it'll send that action directly down to that Recast agent. The Recast agent will run the action and send the results back up to Recast management server, which will forward them back onto the right-click tools. And this is cool because it eliminates all of those other prereqs that we were talking about, right? You don't need to be a local admin on boxes that have the Recast agent, because the agent itself is running in that local system context. You don't need to open any firewall ports on the device, because the Recast agent maintains a persistent connection back to the Recast management server on the port you specify. And in a default Windows installation, output connections are allowed. So there's no need to configure anything extra on that agent. And as I said, it runs in the context of local systems, so you don't need any permissions on the device. And you don't even need an account. You don't need to run your actions as an account that's in the same domain as the device, right? These can be workgroup devices. These can be devices in untrusted domains. It doesn't matter. So if you want to quickly extend your right-click tools to devices that just plain wouldn't work in a normal right-click tools install, you can install Recast agent and gain access to those devices right away without configuring anything in Recast management server. Where things start to get maybe a little more complicated is when we start talking about Recast Proxy and some of the capabilities it adds. So, Recast Proxy is our way of extending right-click tools to service accounts that you specify. And so, we've historically talked about it in the context of untrusted domains, right? So, say we're a corporation that exists in domain A, and we buy another corporation B that has an untrusted domain B. And if we want to manage devices in that untrusted domain, we can spin up a Recast proxy inside or onto a device inside of that untrusted domain that's running as a service account that's adequately permissioned in that domain. And then when we run right-click tools from our admin console, the server will be able to detect, all right, these devices are in this untrusted domain. So we're going to send this action or this component of this action down to the Recast proxy in that untrusted domain. And that service account is going to run those actions on our behalf and report the results back up to that Recast server. And again, this doesn't have to be, the service account itself doesn't have to be related in any way to the domain that the Recast management server is in, to be able to extend that action to devices and end users and other AD objects in untrusted domains. Where this can also get interesting is if you have some rules around which service accounts can reach out to various devices in sections of your network. So, say you have maybe a segmented Active Directory where, there's a high school, say you're a school and you have a high school, middle school, elementary school, and you need to run actions in the high school as a service account that has permissions on high school devices. Well, you can set that up with Recast Proxy too. So the scenarios are pretty robust as far as what you can do with Recast Proxy and Recast Agent. One thing that we're going to kind of briefly talk through is our fast channel support, because this kind of covers all of the components of the right-click tools. All right, so we start with the right-click tools installed in your admin console, and then we send an action up to your Recast management server. And the Recast management server will look at your config manager server for devices that are that have a compatible config manager client install, right? In this case, compatible means like 1706 or later, whatever version that the Microsoft product team added support for PowerShell support in the config client. As long as you have that version or later, you're good. As well as devices that have our Recast agent component installed on them. And the reason you need that Recast agent component is because we need a way to maintain state on these config manager clients, because some of the data that we send back actually exceeds the limits that the config manager fast channel supports. So we need to be able to chunk the data up into multiple PowerShell calls as we're running that action, so that everything works seamlessly from the end user's perspective. And so your Recast management server, figures out which devices it can send this fast channel action to. Then it sends it down to Recast Proxy to translate the Recast management server action into an action that the config manager server can understand, utilizing the config manager SMS provider. And it's actually going to tell that config manager server to go ahead and run a PowerShell script against those devices. The PowerShell script basically calls into that WMI provider that's installed on the config man clients with Recast agent to run the action, and it might call into that WMI provider multiple times in order to chunk the results back up to the server, get them back to Recast Proxy that does the translation back into Recast management server and gets them down to the right-click tools. So there's a fair amount of orchestration there, but the end result is that you'll be able to run your right-click tools without admin rights. You'll be able to run your right-click tools without opening any ports on in the firewall for remote registry, WMI, remote admin shares. And because we're utilizing that fast channel, you can actually run your actions over the cloud management gateway as well. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to demo all of these actually right now. So I'm going to pop over to my config-man console. And to start, I'm just going to run, and actually before we get into that, I'm just looking at the poll results real quick. It looks like 33% of or so have untrusted domains, 33% have workgroup devices. Quite a few have non-VPN connected devices, right? We're up to 76% now, which kind of makes sense. 81% have limited local admin rights. So the service desk users or the people using the config console might not have admin permission on the remote device. And then 67% have maybe more complex firewall rules there. So that's really interesting. And thanks everyone who participated in the poll. So to start with this, I'm gonna just kind of talk about the environment. So here I have a right-click tools install that's pointed at my Recast management server here. This is a default install of Recast management server where I haven't configured any routes. And as we come into our Recast management server web UI, if I come under the routes, we can see the set of routes that get installed out of the box. So up at the top, we have this Recast agent proxy route. And this is that route that sends actions down to devices with the Recast agent installed. In my environment, I have a single Recast agent installed on this box. So if I ran an action on this box, it would get sent down to this Recast agent. But I don't have any other agents installed anywhere else in my environment. So if I happen to run something on RMS test, this box here, it'll get sent to that Recast agent proxy route. If I run an action on any other device, or if I run an action that spans devices in both routes, the majority of them are going to get sent back to the config manager console or the right-click tools. And that's kind of that first scenario with Recast management server that we talked about in the slide deck. And so to kind of show what that looks like, I'm going to come under here to all systems, and I'm just going to run the system information tool. And for the most part, that's going to reach out to a lot of my devices. Most of my devices are configured to allow this, but as we're running this, we can come down here and we can see, well, I'm getting access denied on a couple of devices. And if I expand that, I could see that these are workgroup devices. These aren't devices that are joined to any domain in my environment. It would be nice to be able to get access to some of these, right? I can see a couple of devices where I'm getting a computer is not on error, right? So maybe this is a an ICMP echo issue. I have to enable ICMP echo in my environment. Or, some of these devices I'm getting from an untrusted domain, right? So maybe I don't have my DNS set up right. But even if I did, these devices I wouldn't be able to reach because, because that trust isn't there. I don't have permission to hit those devices. So even if I fix my DNS issue here, I would still get like an access denied error. And then down here at the bottom, I can see, I have another firewall type of issue where the RPC server is unavailable. That ideally I would be able to fix in this environment. So to start, I'm going to focus on this workgroup 01 device. And to do that, I'm going to pop over to my Hyper-V host and then go ahead and go to my workgroup 01 device. And I'm going to install Recast Agent. I've already downloaded it from portal.recastsoftware.com. And I'm just going to kind of go through the wizard here. So I'm going to hit next. This was an old install. It's detecting, I had this configured for a different server before, but I'm just going to go ahead and change it to my RMS test box. I'm going to test the connection and verify that it succeeds. One thing to note here, we do have this option to only install Config Manager Fast Channel support. And this is basically setting up Recast Agent to work only with the WMI provider and not maintain that persistent connection back to Recast Management Server, which is totally fine. That's an option if you want it. I would recommend leaving this box unchecked though, because when you check that box, we're not maintaining that connection, and that Recast Agent connection is actually the fastest way for you to run right-click tools in the environment. We're utilizing a technology called SignalR that was made by Microsoft. It's incredibly fast for sending actions down, and it's going to give you a much better user experience than if you only rely on that fast channel. Now, when you uncheck this box, it doesn't mean you don't get fast channel support, right? We still install that WMI provider. But it's kind of a best of both worlds scenario where if the Recast Agent communication channel is available, we can configure our Recast server to utilize that. If it's unavailable, we can fall back to that fast channel support for example, for scenarios where your users are connected over the CMG. So I'd recommend leaving that unchecked. I'm going to go ahead and do that here, and I'm going to hit install. So there really isn't much to the Recast Agent install. You specify the server, test the connection, and hit go. I'm going to come back to our Recast Management Server, and we can see that it's already trying to connect to my Recast Management Server. So because I installed this on a workgroup device, it's not automatically approved in a default Recast Management Server installation. You can actually control that setting. So if I come down to settings and scroll to the bottom, I can see this Recast Agent approval. If I hit change here, we can see that by default, we're automatically approving agents and trusted domains. These should look familiar to those of you who are configman admins. These are the same, modeled after the same settings that your configman client is using on the site level. And by default, we choose the same option as the configman product team does. So we're going to automatically approve things in trusted domains. If you want, you can automatically approve all agents. If I chose that, then that workgroup device would have come in automatically approved, or you can manually approve it. But because we've kind of already installed it, we have to go ahead and manually approve this. So I'm going to come under the Agents tab and look at Workgroup 01. I'm going to hit Edit here, and I'm just going to go ahead and authorize it. And hit Save. And in a couple of seconds, we should see it connect. There we go. So now we have our agent connected, and I'm going to come back to our system info tool and see if we can't get some information from that device. So right away we see, we're only down to 2 devices that failed with that access denied error. And so if I expand all of these, I'm guessing that we're going to see workgroup 01 somewhere in this list. I'm just going to make this bigger, and there we go. So we installed Recast Agent. We didn't have to touch routing on the Recast Management Server. All we had to do was install it, and now we're getting data back from our workgroup device. It's pretty cool. The next kind of area that I want to focus on are these untrusted domain devices, right? Maybe we just purchased this company and I really want to be able to manage devices in the untrusted domain from the right-click tools without having to worry about which user account I'm connecting or opening the config console with. So in order to do that, I'm going to come over here, and the first step probably is to install our Recast Proxy. And again, Recast Proxy is our way of extending the right-click tools to service accounts in either in untrusted domains or other areas. And so I've got this untrusted workstation up. I'm going to go ahead and sign into it. I'm going to grab my password real quick. Bear with me just a minute. And again, I've downloaded Recast Proxy. I'm just going to go through the install here. Recast Proxy install looks very similar to Recast Agent, except we do prompt for a user account. So I'm going to specify my server here and hopefully spell it right. There we go. I'm just going to use the account that I signed in with for this box. You don't have to sign in with the same box that you're installing with by any means. I'm using the wrong clipboard option here. There we go. Untrust Recast software.local and the username. I'm not going to type that. It'll be. There we go. We'll test the login, make sure I didn't mess that up. All right. So we're going to install it, and kind of similar to before, we're going to come over to our RMS test server. And in a minute, we should see our Recast Proxy. And there we go. We get that same warning that it's trying to connect. We actually have a very similar setting for Recast Proxies. And we have the same set of defaults for Recast Proxies as far as automatically approving it in untrusted domains or trusted domains or manual approval. So I'm going to come under Proxies. I'm going to hit Edit on my Recast Proxy, and I'm going to go ahead and authorize it. So now we have our Recast Proxy. It's available for us to route actions to. But in order to route actions to a Recast Proxy, we actually have to first make a scope. And a scope is our way of saying, to configure a set of devices or users or other objects that are going to target a specific proxy. And scopes, we have a couple of different types of scopes. We have Active Directory scopes and we have config-man scopes. Config-man scopes are going to prompt you for things like, all right, what site code and SFS provider do you want this scope to be relevant for? We'll talk about that in a little bit as we go through the fast channel support. Since we're concerned about an untrusted domain for our use case, we're going to choose one of these options, right? So you can choose Active Directory domain if we just want the scope to apply to the entire domain. We can limit it to a specific OU or container inside of AD, or we can limit it to an Active Directory group. In our case, we only care about the entire domain. So I'm going to go ahead and make it for untrust.recastsoftware.local. I'm going to hit create. And notice we get this warning saying, hey, we don't have an agent for this to route to, or a proxy for this to route to. So I'm going to come under routes here. And I'm actually going to create a new service account route for that. I'm going to choose that new untrusted workstation service account. I'm going to choose a role here. Roles can be used to limit which actions get run on a particular proxy. So, I have a lapse role in here, right? So if I had a specific user account for looking up lapse passwords, for example, I could, specify the lapse role for that service account here. And that way, I'm kind of controlling when things can, or when people can look up lapse passwords, or which users can look up lapse passwords, and then front ending the permissions model inside a Recast management server. So all those lapse password lookups are audited. For this scenario, I just want anything inside of this untrusted domain to go ahead and run on this proxy. So I'm going to create it. And because routes are executed in order from top to bottom, I actually want this above my config-man console user proxy route, right? Because this is kind of a catch-all route. It basically says, anything that didn't run ahead of me, just go ahead and try to run it in the right-click tools, with the exception of running things from the web UI here. But for this scenario, I want this above the right-click tools proxy. I'm going to go ahead and hit save here. And I'm going to go ahead and populate the scope, make sure we're routing correctly. So there we go. It just did a lookup to find all the devices and users inside of that domain. And now that we have the proxy set up, I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh here. And one thing you'll notice is I have less devices in this computer not on category, right? We're not relying on DNS anymore because we're sending the action directly to the proxy, and the proxy is using its own DNS lookups to try to reach out to these devices, right? And since our proxy is in that untrusted domain, it actually has the right DNS settings. So if I kind of expand this out, we can see that now we have our untrusted domain controller here. I'm not seeing the untrusted workstation, but I'm sure it's in this list somewhere. But you kind of get the idea there. So that is Recast Proxy and how we can set up untrusted domain support inside of the right-click tools. The next thing we're going to show is that fast channel support. So I'm going to come over here under proxies. I actually have a proxy already configured that I'm going to utilize for that fast channel support. When we install Recast Management Server, by default, we're going to prompt you for a service account to configure a default proxy, or kind of the first proxy in the environment. And that's what this one is. So I'm already partially there. I've got my proxy configured. I only need to make sure that this user account has permissions to look up devices in ConfigMan, as well as view some of the hardware inventory data. And since Fast Channel relies on that run scripts feature, I'm going to actually have to import a script, PowerShell script. And when I import it, we actually have it bundled inside of the right-click tools install folder under the extras subfolder, and it's called the Recast Config Manager Fast Channel script. I've already imported it. But, you can import it, give it the name you want. Doesn't actually matter what you call it because we're looking up that script based on hash value. But I've got it imported a couple of times in here, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. So we have our proxy set up. Now the next step is to configure a scope. And the scope in this case is going to be used to look up devices in Config Manager that are compatible with our fast channel route. So all I need to do is pick either a ConfigMan site scope or a device collection scope if I want to limit myself to a specific collection for these. In this case, I'm just going to only worry about the entire site. I'm going to create the scope. And again, we get our warning. So we have to add a route for that scope to execute against. I'm going to choose my RMS prod proxy service account. I'm not going to limit this particular one to any specific role. And I'm going to go ahead and choose that config manager scope that I created just a minute ago. For this one, again, I'm going to move it up just a little bit so that it's above my ConfigMan console user proxy. I'm going to save it and go ahead and repopulate that scope. Make sure that we're correctly able to determine those devices. Actually, I made the wrong type of route here. Sorry. I wanted to make a config manager fast channel route. For this one, I'm going to choose that RMS prod proxy, and then I'm going to choose the fast channel scope that I need to create. The fast channel route differs from a normal route in that we're doing that extra bit of validation to make sure that the devices we're targeting have the proper version of the ConfigMan client installed, have that recast agent component installed, and we're going to send to the proxy to do that conversion layer. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to actually go ahead and delete this other one that I created and save that. Yeah, and we should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. In this case, what I would expect to happen is we had a couple of devices that had access denied in our other workgroup devices. Those devices actually have a Recast agent installed, and they're pointed to a different Recast management server than the one we have here. All right, so if I come in here and I look for those devices, they're just taking a little bit longer because we're using that fast channel scope. So we'll just give it a minute. But they should show up in this list as, workgroup 02, workgroup 03. And, assuming the device is on, we actually have a CMG connected device as well that should show up in this list. And while that's running, just kind of show what's happening behind the scenes. If I come under here under script status and sort by client operation ID, go to the top, we can see we have a couple of scripts running. We have this aptly named script. And as we come under script details, we can see, we're running that system information action, the get general information against server 2012 R2, that box. So, as we come in this list, we should see, our server 2012 R2 box somewhere in here. I'm not seeing it, but yeah, where is some of our devices? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just not scrolling down far enough. So, we see our CMG connected device. We got lucky; it was turned on today. So this is actually interacting with this device over the cloud management gateway via that config manager fast channel. We have a couple of workgroup devices here that I mentioned. These have Recast agents installed on a completely different Recast management server, but because we installed that WMI provider, we can actually utilize the fast channel against those devices and get support for hitting them for free across multiple Recast management servers in this case. So by adding that fast channel route, and some of the other routes, we've greatly improved our ability to run actions here. We're hitting a much higher success rate in our environment. The last bit I kind of want to talk about is our audit log page. And as we're kind of talking through some of the stuff, it's often valuable to look and see where things are being run. So here we can kind of see the type of proxy being invoked in order to get our actions run. Right, we see the right-click tools are being invoked, and a couple of Recast proxies are being invoked as we might expect, as well as which Recast proxy. Right, so we can see we're still hitting that untrusted domain for some devices. We're bulk of them are actually coming from our local proxy here. So that's kind of cool. Can help you troubleshoot some of the rules that you might have set up. The other thing I want to touch on a little bit is the ability to control permissions based on some of those scopes that we've specified. So scopes are kind of dual purpose. One, they let you control where actions are being run via our proxies, via our routes and our proxies configuration, but they'll also let you limit user permissions for specific users. So for example, if Mark here really shouldn't be looking at things outside of that untrusted domain, I can go ahead and limit him to just devices in that untrusted domain. And so now then when he tries to run actions against any devices outside of that, he's going to get an insufficient recast permission error. And note here, he's given full admin access, but only to objects that exist within this scope. So it's a really powerful way to make sure that the users in your environment are only targeting the devices or user objects in Active Directory or inside a config man that you want them to target. So powerful for things like service desk. If service desk users shouldn't be interacting with servers, you can limit them here. You can also limit based on any other organizational construct that you can think of that's relevant for your environment. So I think that concludes the demo portion. I'm going to hand this back to Marty to take us through some resources and answer any remaining questions that people might have on scopes and routes.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Very good. So what we are going to do now, you've probably seen all this and you are thinking, oh man, what do I do next? Where can I get support on how I do all of this stuff? And what can I do next? What I'm going to do here in a second is share my screen and just walk through a little bit of where the resources are for our stuff. If there we go. Now I can go ahead and share my screen. Um, so what I wanted to do is just go through a little bit where the information on doing these things is located on our website. So if you haven't been there before, and I hope you have, but we have our documentation site, which is actually at docs.recastsoftware.com. And that is going to have just a ton of information about the tools themselves, some troubleshooting information that you can do. If you drop down, it'll show some current troubleshooting information, some feature documentation. But some important stuff that it's going to show here is going to be the installation information. If you actually look, we've got information on setting up enterprise with management server and proxy. And then we also have some documentation on configuring fast channel support as well. So if you're interested in doing actions over fast channel, or if you're interested in doing actions over the Cloud Managed Gateway, this would be your start to getting things configured so that you can do that kind of stuff. You can also search up here if there's something that you're looking for that you just can't find. Go ahead and have a search and you should be able to find it. Another resource that we have that has a ton of information about things that exist in right-click tools is also the blog right here. This is written by a couple of people that are working on the product that have are really great. Gary Block does a bunch of our blogging and has some great articles on how things work, and he goes through step by step exactly how to configure things and how to set things up. So if you were potentially looking for setting up fast channel, you could absolutely do a search on it. It's going to pop up and show you exactly how to, you can get the blog information right here, and it's going to show you exactly how to set up fast channel if that were something that you'd be interested in. You could also look up agent in there or proxy, and it would show you how to set those things up as well. Last thing, as far as support, what I wanted to also just point out is if you have questions that maybe you're not quite sure how we exactly describe that in maybe in our documentation site or in the blog, or honestly, if you just want us to take a look at your environment and make sure that things are set up correctly, you can absolutely contact us right here. Go ahead and feel free to submit a ticket. That's going to create a ticket in our ticketing system so that we can answer any questions that you might have or problems that you might be having. If you'd like to schedule a call, you can do that right here, and we can go ahead and do a screen share and look through things with you as we're going through those. Or this one right here, if I wasn't in a webinar right now, you'd actually see my smiling face right there saying, "Hi, it's Marty. Is there something I can help you with?" And what you can actually do is you can click right there and we can do an online chat to actually communicate with, what exactly you might have a question about, or if there's something that you need, we can absolutely help you that way. You can also leave a message if, like you can see here, if there isn't anybody available right now, you can go ahead and leave a message, and then when we are back in the office or when we are off of our webinars or whatever, we can absolutely answer your question. Speaking of questions, now is the time. If you have any questions about the things that you saw today or any of the setups, any of that kind of thing that you have questions about, now is the time. In the little Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen, I believe, you can go ahead and click on that and we will answer questions now. When will right-click tools runner be fixed for scheduling? Um, Not exactly sure about that question. If you have a specific, and I'm guessing we've talked about this, and there's probably something that I'm forgetting. If there's a specific question, feel free to go ahead and submit a ticket or send me an email or go ahead and leave a message about what that specific action is. It's possible there were some runner actions that I know we were having trouble scheduling, but I think those things should be mostly worked out, but I will absolutely take a look at it and we'll get a better answer for you. Okay, scheduling doesn't work if I want to choose a specific time. I can run runner live and it works. Okay, very good. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and check in our backlog on that. I believe that was an item that got put there and I will let you know if that has been taken care of. Go ahead and send me an email and then we'll take care of that, answering that question. When is the next general webinar on right-click tools? Good question. I'm not exactly sure on when the next general webinar would be, but I do know that we try and have webinars about once a month to give you some information on right-click tools. So if you are looking for more of those, make sure that you are getting emails from us and you should have more information about when that webinar is coming.
Yeah, and we're just about to do the 4.4 release,
Oh,
so
sure.
you can expect a webinar at the end of next month.
Yeah.
That'll cover all the new features in 4.4.
And that'll be a little bit more general than we got kind of specific in the weeds on advanced scenarios here that may not exist, and that'll be a little bit more generic toward right-click tools. Cool. All right. If you have any other thoughts, any other questions, we absolutely can. We can absolutely answer. All right. Chris, I think you answered everything. Such a good demo. We don't even need to answer questions.
As long as I can remember to scroll.
Yeah,
Great.
well, you'll get it. All right, so if you have a question that maybe you weren't able to ask or you didn't want to ask for some reason, you didn't want to hear it out loud, remember you can absolutely go and either submit a ticket, leave a message, and we can absolutely respond to your ticket there or question. And at that,
Well, cool.
yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining. I think we can probably wrap this up and give everyone some time back. Like Marge said, please feel free to ask any questions you have of us. And this webinar was recorded, and I imagine we'll post a YouTube video at some point to everyone who attended. So thanks everyone for joining.
Yep, thanks everybody.